All right, in this video, we need to talk about myths and fatalism coming up. Welcome to the CodeX Cantina, no crypto today, and we are back to be talking about Bakemonogatari Part 2. We're just doing the Suruga Monkey Act, and I know the first question some of you may be asking is, whoa, you had a big issue with the second story in the first Part 1. What are you doing back here? Well, the reality is I was asked by several people, both publicly, and I received even private messages to say, can you please continue sharing with us your analysis on the story? And I am susceptible to flattery. The reality is that we're working on another book right now, an incredibly difficult book right now, that I also kind of needed a release, to be quite honest. I am going to continue the Monogatari series, at least, without crypto for the near future. Now, with that said, I did some research on kind of how some other channels have done it, and we're clearly very different, where we are not going to be showing you anime clips, or really, we were not watching the anime at all. We're just looking at the light novels, and there's some other videos out there that are wonderful in terms of research and really good, I would even argue, collegiate level analysis. And then there's even some review videos. We're going to focus more on the analysis side of things. So if you're new to literary criticism, the idea is that once an author publishes it, it's going to go through a filter of my reading filter, and I'm going to interpret a way that might be different from perhaps some others have done out there. I have looked at what some others have done, and I've got some unique analysis with myths today. But if things get kitschy again, I've been told over and over again about something called the toothbrush scene. I don't know what that is. I'm gonna hit it. I'm probably gonna hate it. For right now, this is filling a need that I have in my life that I really enjoy, and we're gonna be going through it. So quotes, I feel like I need to cover this because some people were upset that we didn't cover some more of the main themes in part 2. But there's a quote that says, "It seems the monkey's paw was an item created in India by an old mystic to teach people that they should live according to their fate and that terrible disasters await those who defy it." That just sums up a lot of what Nisi-Yosin, I believe, was going through consciously. Now, the way and the mechanism that he does that is he actually explores myths a lot more than maybe what you might have noticed in this book. And if you've noticed it, great, but let's talk about it today. But rumors are rumors. Half serious. They aren't necessarily true. But here I'm going to bring in, this is actually one of my favorite texts of all time. This is Faust by Goethe, which was referred to several times in this piece. I don't know, I think if you're a regular light novel reader, I don't think this would be one of your favorite stories. But as a guy who has read The Monkey's Paws and who has studied and written papers on Faust, I think I can share some interesting analysis with you today. So let's go through the summary and then we'll jump into our analysis. So in terms of summary, Suruga Kamboru is a hotshot basketball player for her school. Her name is kind of synonymous with legendary figures, if you will. She begins following, I'm going to start calling him Ragi instead of Araragi because that's hard for me to pronounce, and Ragi just sounds more adorable. So she begins following Ragi around with her injured left hand, and he denies being in a relationship with Hitagi. Next scene, Ragi is in a relationship with Hitagi at her place, so we kind of see that he's a very unreliable narrator, right? And when Ragi leaves to deliver the envelope to Oshino, he is attacked by a strong left-handed individual. Who could it be? It's quickly revealed that it's Suruga Kamboru. And they take her to Oshino, where the monkey's paw and Faust references are kind of brought out about in terms of legends, in terms of myths. And it's revealed that she has a negative side to her wish, in the same way that the monkey's paw or a deal with the devil story is written. You wish for something, but you get the negative of it instead. If you've seen the movie Bedazzled starring Brendan Fraser, that's an entire movie exploring the negative sides of wishes, the negative deal with the devil, if you will. So after a really awesome fight scene with Ragi and he gets his butt beat, Hitagi shows up because Oshino called her. It's kind of revealed that there was these, Kamboru would wish for something, but the negative side of that wish is what would come out and kind of cause harm to the world. And by kind of negating the fact that she couldn't kill Hitagi or Ragi, it kind of negated the deal with the devil, if you will. So the next day, Ragi wakes up. Awkward scene with his younger sisters. That's going somewhere. I don't know where. It's super awkward though. And and he sees Kamboru outside, and she's kind of healed, but still kind of carrying the scars of her past with the bandages. So high level, that's kind of the theme, the plot. Let's talk about some analysis now. So I'm still figuring out this series as we go, but when you bring up myths, you kind of have to bring up fatalism. And I think that's why Nisi-Yosin has some chops that I think people are underestimating, because he clearly shows he understands that in this text. But real loose, fatalism is the idea that you start in one spot, it doesn't matter what happens in this middle part. You're going to end up at this end part no matter what. So where that end part and start part and end part begin and end, that's debatable. But that's the basic idea of fatalism, that no matter what you do, you will end up at the same spot every time. It's different from determinism, where each choice you make, almost kind of like a predetermined selection, will decide where you end up. It's a little bit different, where the middle part doesn't matter. And we know that he picks up on this because we have tons of quotes. I'll name a couple here, but in chapter 2, if what happened on May 14th was fate and not a fluke, then sending every day of the following 2 weeks in peace and quiet must have also been fate and not a fluke. Notice the usage of fate here. Fate was very important to, particularly, I'm going to say Greeks a lot when it comes to mythology, but obviously there's myths from every culture and every race from around the world. Another quote later on, I was fatally unathletic at the time, and that's Kambaru talking about how she was really unathletic before she got the monkey's paw. You'll notice the usage of the word fatally unathletic. Very clearly, Nisiosian is talking about the idea that you are predestined to end up at a particular part in time in your life, no matter what choices you make. In the same way that he kind of explores that with Kambaru, where she's talking about she didn't make decisions that her hand did. The hand did it on its own. She ended up at the end space fatalistically where she was intended to go. So that brings us to kind of myths. What is a myth? It can be an ancient story involving gods of a particular kind that you pray to, very common in Shintoism and a lot of the oceanic kind of cultures. But myths can also be something that is commonly believed but not true. Okay, so we kind of have two meanings to the word myth. Focusing on the Greek side of these stories, is these were passed down orally. And what happened is there generally would be a start point, and there'd kind of be some main milestones and an end point along the way. But the way that that story unfolds is going to change a little bit based on memory and based on the storyteller, where they may interpret or make a decision differently because this is not a written down story. They may add or subtract certain details based on their own personal experiences. In the same way that fatalism may end up at the same place, but may take different paths to get there. You will end up at the same place. That's kind of how myths were written. A quote, every detail of her behavior that hardly seems to matter and hardly does turns into gossip and courses through the school. So we see the students orally passing down these legends, these things that Kambaru is doing. And Kambaru herself has admitted to tinkering and making and aggrandizing her own story through that. She admitted that in this. I think if you really wanted to push like a paper on Greek mysticism in this, you could even talk about how sports basketball is a descendant, if you will, of the old Greek and Roman blood sports. She was recognized by her footsteps before she was even seen, in the same way that these mythic heroes were recognized before they were seen. Minor point, but worth pointing out. But the Greeks developed a particular structure when it came to telling these stories. They always involved a muse. A muse was important to separate the personal tellings that people had with these stories. By having a separate person whose only job was to tell the story as it actually happened, that was allegedly a way to give some unity and cohesion to the story. I mentioned we're reading another story right now that involves a lot of Greek mysticism as well. And what the author does in the first chapter of Absalom, is they make the first character the muse of the story. They tell the entire events, because a lot of times what happens with these Greek tragedies and plays is they're based on real things. They would tell all the events that were going to happen, just so everyone in the audience was on the same page. But then what would happen is they would introduce characters and kind of push the plot around. So if Nisiosian is truly grabbing these Greek myths and these fatalistic ideas, is he following the structure? I think he is. Here's why. The Hachikuji, who I had a major issue with in the last chapter, plays a questionable role here. What was her role? You'll notice that she asked questions of Ragi, but only later on, like for example with Hitagi, he denied having feelings with her, kind of presenting a story. And then there's more details later on, like in the next chapter it's revealed, hey, he kind of is in a relationship with her, which we knew from this awkward relationship that was started in number 2. But even the choices of words, so in Absalom, he uses the word muse, I believe, 3 times in that opening chapter. And in one section, like, he uses it twice in a sentence where, like, there's a parenthetical that he injects the word muse into to get it twice in that sentence. Nisiosin does the same thing here. I quote, "As I mused, 2 high school students passed to the left of my bike, right during the Hachikuji scene." So let's keep exploring this. Is he doing this on purpose? And I think he absolutely is. Let's talk about there's different ways to explore myths, like we talked about earlier, in terms of the lie as opposed to the story with creatures. In terms of just straight myths, we've got references like the Valhalla duo. That's a Norse mythology myth, and they even kind of discuss it in terms of is the heavenly hall where Odin, the supreme deity, resides and welcomes the spirits of heroes who had died in battle. Then there's a reference to Medusa. We have Oshina calls Hitagi over from the battle. And there's the quote, "What was she, Medusa?" Now we have a third one with Sappho. So if you did not know, Sappho was a Greek poet who lived on the island Lesbos. She was frequently cited also for her homosexual writing, particularly from the lesbian side of things. And you'll notice that Kambaru referred to herself as sapphic, as in sapphic love, as in the homosexual love that comes from Sappho, the Greek poet. Going into the story side of things, we have the reference to Faust. We have the reference to the monkey's paw. We have the reference to Rashomon, a very famous Japanese tale that was kind of translated into an Akira Kurosawa film. Classic. Definitely check it out. We will be putting that up on the channel here soon. Aesop's Fables, Aesop being Greek as well. And then there's the mythic sayings too, even where there's sayings that come derived out of these. We had when the devil's away, the mice will play. That is a play on when the cat is away, the mice will play. And it's interesting too, instead of using the word cat, they use the word devil to describe Kambaru, who was possessed by the rainy coat devil, if you will. Very good job, Nisiosin. And we have the quote, "Even monkeys fall from trees." And again, the Suruga monkey arc. Nisiosin, very good at the wordplay. I don't always love it, but I admit for those that are into that sort of thing, this is a gold mine for that sort of thing. So if you didn't know, Faust was based on Dr. Faustus, kind of like the tragic flaw. If you look at the hamartia, the tragic flaw of this character from the Marlowe poem back in the day, Faustus was ambitious in nature. Despite being a respected scholar, he sold his soul to Lucifer by signing a contract with his blood for achieving ultimate power and limitless pleasure in the world. He learns the art of black magic and defies Christianity. We see a tragic conflict where Faustus is thinking about repenting, but it is all too late. Finally, the devil takes his soul away to hell, and he suffers eternal damnation because of his over-ambition. So this is all part of that. When you look at the way a tragedy is structured, tragedy isn't just life sucks or things happen that are bad. There's a specific structure where the character will have a goal, but it's going to be the wrong goal, okay? They'll have miscalculated, and that's called the hamartia. It's the idea that the character has miscalculated something, and that's their downfall. And we see that here with her wish of wanting to do better. Right? I want to run faster. I want to be with Hitagi. And that's where the negative side comes about in terms of harming the students that got that in the race and harming Ragi, her sexual competitor in this situation as well. She brought her own downfall in this situation, which is a very classic and important step to establishing a successful tragedy and not just things that suck and hurt a character. So we're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Let me just leave you with this last quote of, "No one can take someone else's place, and no one can become someone else either." So we saw this is actually an incredibly, I think, very literature important piece in terms of intertextuality of their ability to discuss famous Greek myths, talking about myths, how they're propagated, how they're passed down but fatalistically end at the same place, about how a character's downfall was created through themselves in the miscalculation of the wish as opposed to the negative side of things. I think Nishio-sin did a really good job with this piece in the same way that I was in love with the part 1 section. Now we also need to real quickly bring up the Polonia Box, which is actually important in a lot of more old school Asian tradition, with the idea that when a child was born, you would plant a Polonia tree, and then once they were married, you'd chop it down and build a box out of it. That was the box that Kanbaru got the monkey's paw from when she opened it. Now remember, her parents died in a car accident a couple days later, and when her mom gave her that box, that was the last time that she saw her. There's a Western flaw here where while the phoenix is reborn and there is a lot of different Asian ways to interpret the phoenix, the idea of being reborn in a fire, I believe, is not common in Japan. Maybe it is in some parts, I'm not quite sure. But as far as I'm aware, that is not part of the symbology there, where when the parents die in a fire car crash a couple days later. I'm not sure I was there on that part, but I did want to call that out. That could be a common mistake that someone may make in interpreting this from a Western audience eye. The box is supposed to bring good luck, and Kanbaru kind of shut down afterwards. And they have this quote, "You can't expect people to treat you kindly when you've closed off your heart." Very clearly, this is kind of in the same way that Hitagi had that problems where she tried to emotionally shut off or get rid of grief. You have Kanbaru kind of approaching the same thing, which I think is kind of maybe why I like both of these, is that there is a lot of literary discussion here, and how the grandparents just threw away everything from the parents to try to raise the child new, kind of the child going through a rebirth, if you will. Wholly underexplored in this section, but I think there was a lot of potential there. We'll see if it comes out in the future. I'm still new to this series, so I don't know where it's going to go, how episodic this is versus how ongoing the plot is. I'm still learning that. In terms of opposites, we have a quote from Nishio-sin from himself. He says, "Once I've fully established the character, I make sure to think of a character that will act as a direct contrast." And I think it's interesting the way he kind of explores opposites in this piece as well. We have the quote from Kanbaru, "For those who see me as a sporty girl, I am that. For those who see me as an exhibitionist, I am that too." We see her also compare the lesbianic versus the sapphic love, if you will. Sappho also representing a lot of that sexual ambiguity. You have two sides being presented for her in that perspective as well. The demon or the monkey, whether they stepped into or away from a relationship, and whether they did or didn't know Ashino. There's a kind of a quote in there about that. There's a lot of direct comparisons, I feel like, between characters in this piece. And that's very important for how the story resolves, too, with the contract, where they didn't want to hurt either Ragi or Hitagi, because Hitagi kind of brought it out at this point in time that she would never forgive her if Ragi was hurt. You have the two sides of the contract presented here as well. I think this is interesting when you go back to the Faust piece, where the enemy of Christianity is knowledge. And you'll notice that there was actually even a direct rip from Oshino in there where he's like, "Hey, I'm not here for salvation. That's not my role in life." That's kind of a direct rip on Christianity and the alternate Asian view that's being presented here in the story. A lot of Asian gods, Shintoism and such, are presented in a way where they're not totally good, not totally evil. It's not good versus evil like the way Christianity is. And that's also, if you'll notice when they referenced Rashomon earlier, it's the idea that they're presenting their truth, but that not might be the absolute truth. It's true to them, and they may not be lying about it, but that not might be the way that other people would have interpreted that truth at that time. Again, two sides to the story presented. And I think that comes to a head with Oshino when he's got that line where he says, "I'll help you, but you must save yourself," when he's talking about that, "I won't save you. You've got to do it yourself." Obviously a very different view from a lot of way Westerners would look at this type of a story. So the last thing I wanted to bring up is just more of an opinion thing. So a lot of literary criticism comes down to there's an angle, you discuss it, you back it up with quotes. And there's not much you can do. If you can back it up with quotes, it's kind of hard to discredit it. This is my opinion now. So we're leaving the literary criticism sides of this video and going to my opinion, and that's the breadcrumbs. I have not read the Kizu story yet, and I'm told that I was supposed to read this Bakemonogatari part first before going into that. There will be more emotional resonance if you do it this way. I will say I'm looking at this and I'm seeing these breadcrumbs, right, in terms of what happened in Spring Break, how he's somehow linked to Shinobu, somehow, I don't know how, and this Hanekawa that gets referencing to something about with a cat. I realize that these are breadcrumbs to check out what those stories are going to be, and I know we'll get there, and that's part of why I'm interested in going in the story, is to kind of explore this story, because the first story and this one, the third story, are wonderful. I did not care for the second story at all, but it's interesting the way that these are kind of being played out. I can't imagine. I'm excited to find out, but I'm calling that it's difficult for me to see how what's happened here, just because I don't know the context of what's happened, is going to give me emotional value as a reference saying this happened last spring break. I'm putting that down in a video to predict, so that when I'm wrong, you can hold me to it and be like, see, I told you. Or we'll come back to it when we do read the Kizu, and I'll be like, hey, you can't call this as emotional resonance to say that this was valuable to know what she did or didn't do in spring break. I probably need to wrap this video up because of our format. I do appreciate you guys taking the time, and I do, honestly, for those that have reached out and asked me to continue, I do appreciate that. If you had not done that, and you had not given me support in terms of sharing the video, liking that video, discussing things with me, I would not actually have continued. I would have probably done something else. So thank you for those that are supporting, sharing, liking these videos. It is because of you that I have continued this series, if that is something that you had wanted. If not, no big deal. No one's forcing you to watch this video, guys. We appreciate it if you did take the time. And we'll look forward to following up. I will be doing this next story. What is the next story? Snake? Nadeko Snake, I think it was. Find out what the heck is happening there, and we'll find out more about the analysis here. So tell me what you guys thought about some of these points about fatalism and about the Greek mythos that's kind of brought into this piece. I think it's very valuable to kind of discuss these sort of things. Una out.